Welcome back to the OnShape drawing layout tutorial, part number 2. In this section, we will be discussing how to adjust dimension units and precision, how to properly dimension an object. We'll be discussing some basic dimensioning philosophy. We'll discuss line thickness settings and proper printing. So let's get on with completing the drawing and layout of the bearing from lesson number 4. So previously in part number 1, we discussed how to import a title block, insert views, how to scale our views, and how to get the proper orthographic views with hidden lines turned on, turning tangent lines off, and adding center lines. So in order to add dimensions, we just need to use the dimension tool right here. It is very intuitive, so I can just click on the edge of an arc and it will automatically determine whether or not that's a full circle, in which case it's dimensioned by diameter, or whether it's just an arc or a partial circle, in which case it's dimensioned by a radius. Now you'll notice that the numbers are very odd. These don't look like very clean numbers. Well, I'm actually dimensioning it currently in inches right now. And this is a metric part, so we need to adjust our units to be metric units. In order to change the units, I can just go over to my drawing properties, the wrench, and if I click on that wrench, the very first tab is for units and precision. You'll notice for my options for units, I have inches as well as inches fractional. So understand that there's a difference between inches and inches fractional. Inches gives me decimal inches, as you can see here, or inches fractional will give me fractional inches, so 3 and 15/16. And I can obviously do millimeters so that I'm in metric. And again, I can change my precision. So for this object, most of the dimensions were whole millimeters, so I do not need the precision of all the zeros. So for right now, I can say reduce that to 1 decimal point on the 0, and now I can go back to dimensioning this object. I have several things to dimension here, several arcs. I can click on any kind of edge or flat surface and it will dimension that for me. Here you can see from this edge to this edge of the cylinder is 100 millimeters, which is the diameter, which I already have dimensioned here. So having that dimensioned twice is actually a really big no-no. So let's not do that. I'm going to hit escape on the keyboard. I'm going to select that dimension and delete it. What I need is since I have all the radii and diameters dimensioned up above, what I really need is I need the distance from the center of this arc and circle to the center of that arc over there. If I were to simply click on the edge of a circle and then click another arc or circle, it will automatically assume that I'm dimensioning from center to center. But you'll notice, and if I zoom in here, you'll see that dimension covers up that center line that I created from part 1 of this video tutorial. So technically that sort of also doesn't go very well because that covers up that center line and we no longer have a gap for the extension line. The extension line should never touch the object, and we've lost that gap. So I'm going to hit escape on my keyboard again. I'm going to select this dimension and delete it. And this time, when I select my linear dimension tool, I'm going to select the end of the center line here and snap to the end of the center line here and insert that dimension. And you'll notice, one, the center line does not get covered up with the extension line, and the extension line has its correct gap from the edge that it's actually dimensioning. So it never touches the edge that it's actually dimensioned from. Now another thing that is important is that it's important that the dimensions are never too close. So if I hit escape on my keyboard, I can grab any dimension and move it wherever I want. Obviously, this could be on the inside, but again, that ruins the communication of size. So it's important that dimensions are to the outside. But again, it's also important that dimensions are not too close. If the dimensions are too close, they begin to blend in with the shape of the object, and that's not very good. So I think it's a much better idea to space away, and at minimum, roughly about a ½ inch, so that it's a healthy space away. And many people might think that I really want a dimension from the end to end here. I want to know how long is this object. Well, if I were to try to dimension that again, when I click on this edge here, and then I click on this edge over here, it always assumes I want to go center to center. And that actually is a very good assumption. You want that. You really don't want to dimension from the end or edge of an arc to the edge of an arc. You really need to know where the centers of those arcs are. So dimension center to center, and then just add on whatever this radius is, and add on whatever this radius is right here. If I have those dimensions in a nice row, I can just add them up. The only confusing bit is that this is a diameter. It is a cylinder, so I should dimension it by diameter. But it would be nice if it was radius, so that way I could calculate the total length. So that would be half of this 100, which would be 50, plus 140, plus another 50. So it really should only be 240 millimeters long from this edge of the arc to this edge of the arc. I could, in my dimension options here, if I actually open up the menu of different dimensions I can use, I could do this with a radial dimension. So I could click on this and actually get a radius here. So I could get rid of this dimension, and with this as a radius, inference off the other dimensions so they're all lined up nicely. And I have these dimensions all in a nice row, spaced away from the object nicely, and I can easily calculate the length of this object. It's always nice, again, to sort of have your dimensions not too close to the object and kind of spaced away nicely. I need to dimension the center of this arc and the center of this arc. So I'm going to use my linear dimension tool, and I'm going to dimension from the end of center line to the end of center line. And I'm going to put that dimension up here so it doesn't interfere with the 140. Hitting the escape tool, I can kind of reposition my dimension so that it looks nice. It's spaced away and not too close to the object. But it would be nice to know what is the complete length of this slot. Well, that's going to be 70 millimeters plus 12.5 plus 12.5 on the other side. So I would ideally like to move this 12.5 so that it is in line or aligned with the center to center distance. And to communicate that both ends are 12.5 millimeters, I can actually double click on this dimension and it opens up a little window where I can put in a suffix, so something at the end of this. So I can put a capital X 2, so times 2. And if I click in this open space now, you can see that that shows up. 12.5 times 2, so 12.5 on this side, 12.5 radius on that side. So 70 plus 25 would give us, it's 95 millimeters total from this end of the slot to that end of the slot. If you really want to be precise, I could actually add one little space, my space bar, and that looks just a little bit more clear. Now all I have left is to dimension my front view, and there's not many dimensions left that I have to necessarily deal with, but I can dimension the height of the cylinder, 60, and the height of the base, which is 20. Now you'll notice over here the dimension lines are outside of the extension lines, and that is okay. And notice again, once again, that the extension lines don't actually touch the object. OnShape is preset to give you a specific gap there, so you're all set there. So we are all set dimensioning this object. All we have to do now is to fill in the type box with our units and our scale and our date and the title. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now that I've actually filled in the title block, I don't need these two little scale labels, so I can actually select them and delete them. They're no longer. And this last little piece right here, the 1/1, this is the drawing number. So this is drawing 1/1. If there were multiple drawings of an object, I could have this drawing 1 of, say, 5, 2 of 5, 3 of 5, etc. The last thing we need to do is make a proper printout. Okay, now that I've completed my filling in my title block and adding my dimensions, stop. 3, 2, 1, mark. Now that I've completed dimensioning my object and filling in my title block, now is the time for me to make a few adjustments to the line thicknesses so that I get a proper printing. It's important that the visible lines print out thick. The hidden lines should be medium thickness. The center line should be thin. Extension and dimension lines should also be thin. To make those adjustments, I need to click on the wrench for the drawing properties and go to the views. Under views, you can see that they have thicknesses for visible lines, tangent lines, hidden lines, etc. So what I want to do is I want to make the visible lines thick. So I'm going to make those 0.53, and the hidden edges should be medium thickness. So medium thickness would be roughly about 0.25. And finally, when I do cutting plane lines, those should actually be thick as well. So I actually choose the 0.60 thickness millimeters for the thickness for the cutting plane lines. So now when I go to actually print this out, I need to just go to the 3 bars next to where it says OnShape, and I would say print. Here's a print preview, and if I were to zoom in here, you should see that the visible lines are nice and thick, the hidden lines are medium, center lines, extension lines, and dimension lines are thin, so we'll get a really nice printout. Now that we've completed the printout for the bearing, you should now know how to create a drawing / layout in OnShape for pretty much any object. You know how to import the title block, you know how to adjust the orthographic views, how to add dimensions, how to fill in the title block, how to make some adjustments to how the printout works, and you should have enough skill to practice on your own. Good luck and see you in class.